First question here this week asks about, okay, so I've kind of lost my menstrual cycle, but I'm still feeling like I have too much body fat. I want to go through a fat loss phase. What should I do? Should I maintain and try to work my calories up until my menstrual cycle comes back? Or should I just go through a fat loss phase and then hope that the menstrual cycle comes back? And I think that this can also apply to guys as well that are in a situation where they're like, yeah, I'm at the lower end of my settling point. I have food focus. I am not performing well in the gym. I'm hungry all the time. Should I just continue this fat loss phase, gut it out, or what should I do? And I think that this is definitely a difficult question, and I almost don't have enough context to give you a very good answer, because it probably depends on, okay, what level of leanness are you actually at right now? Like, are you actually pretty dang lean, but you just want to be ultra lean? Or are you at a healthy body fat right now and things haven't returned? What is your diet history? Did you recently come out of a diet, or have you been maintaining or eating enough food for a long enough time to where you're feeling pretty good? Are you noticing any other indicators of food focus or anything else like that you still have diet fatigue? And all those factors can play into what to do here. And, some people or some females are totally fine with losing their menstrual cycle, and some of them are okay with the trade-offs of staying leaner to have a little bit more food focus and not really seeing their menstrual cycle come back. Now, the loss of your menstrual cycle is a potential indicator of relative energy deficiency, which is essentially not eating enough food for your basic processes in your body and stuff like that. And this is partially what we might be seeing when we see someone's metabolic rate kind of adapt, or when we see their energy expenditure adapt throughout a diet. It could be partially because of these decreases in some of these systemic things that are going on within our body and stuff like that. So what should you do here? Well, I personally would lean towards staying out of a deficit and eating enough food to maintain, slowly adding calories back in, and training hard, building some muscle, and seeing if things can kind of come back to normal then, and then considering the fat loss phase is which way I would lean. And, for guys that are in a position to where they're at the lower end of their settling point, but they still feel like they have fat to lose, I think that taking a month at maintenance, just eating enough food, there's really not many downsides to that. And I think that there's more downsides to trying to push it, male or female, in a situation where you already feel like you're kind of, I'm trying to think of a better word than hormonally compromised, but you're already in a position where you're potentially under your settling point. And if you keep pushing that fat loss phase, I think that you run the risk of going off the rails, swinging back up really quickly with your weight and stuff like that, and ending up in a worse off place. So I think that without having more context, I would say working your calories back up and maintaining, trying to build those calories and get things back off on a good level hormonally is probably the approach that I would go for. But again, your history with diets, how you're feeling, your food focus, all that stuff would play a role into that. All right. So I hope that helps there. Hard to give a hard answer there without being your actual coach and having more context there. All right. Next question is how to know when you're doing too much or too little in the gym. So, I think that it doesn't make any sense to just do a program and to not pay attention to how you are actually responding or anything like that. And I think that it's very important to make sure you are paying attention to how you respond. So I would look at what I would shoot for is pretty good pumps, a good mind-muscle connection, getting some fatigue and soreness the following day after training a muscle group, not seeing overlapping soreness. If you're seeing overlapping soreness, I would do a little bit less volume. And subjective difficulty, like did the session feel challenging? If yes, okay, that's a good sign. Did it feel crazy easy? Okay, probably can do a little bit more here. And looking at all these factors together is important. So if you got no pumps, it felt easy, and you didn't have much soreness and fatigue the following day, I would do a little bit more. If you got good pumps, a little bit of soreness, a little bit of fatigue, and it felt moderately challenging, awesome. I think that that's probably about right. And then if you have overlapping soreness, it felt really, really challenging, and you still would likely have good pumps, or sometimes you might notice that during your training, you lose your ability to kind of get a good mind-muscle connection. Like it was good at first, but then you just kind of feels like you're moving weight around and not getting a good mind-muscle connection anymore. That could be a sign of doing some junk volume and doing a little bit too much. So in those scenarios, I would decrease volume a little bit. And how much to decrease and that sort of thing? Well, if you're not noticing anything and it's super on the super easy side of things, I would probably increase 2 or 3 sets for that muscle the next training session. And the same on the flip side. If it's really hard, overlapping soreness, stuff like that, I would decrease by 2 to 3 sets for that muscle. And then if it feels about right, I might continue to increase 1 set each additional session just because you're going to get used to that volume and you can kind of accumulate that way throughout a mesocycle, all right? So that's kind of how I approach adjusting volume there, all right? Next question. What do you think about dumbbells versus bands versus body weight exercises? So I think that I would rank them to where dumbbells provide a very good like stimulus to fatigue ratio and a good stimulus per set. Body weight exercises, I think they're okay. I don't think that they provide a lot of fatigue. And I think that the stimulus is okay, but not quite as stimulative as dumbbells. And I would say that if I switch from doing barbell and dumbbell movements and went all body weight, I would probably have to do about 20 to 30% more volume for a similar stimulus. That's not based off of anything, but that's just kind of what feels right for my own training right now. And then with bands, I would say that they are less stimulative than body weight exercises, at least for me anyways, but they also don't cause that much fatigue. So I would say if you switch from all dumbbells to bands, you might need 50+% sets to notice a similar level of stimulus. So if I did 5 sets of dumbbell curls, I feel like I would need like 8 sets, maybe 9 sets of band work, probably 50-60% more volume. And say for the chest, if I'm doing 10 sets of dumbbell bench press or barbell bench press, how many sets of push-ups might I need? Man, I think I might need 14, 15 sets. So for bodyweight stuff, you're maybe looking at 30 to 50% more volume to get a similar stimulus. I think so anyways. And for bands, it could be 50-60% additional volume. So when you're creating your home workouts, it's a general rule of thumb that, hey, you might need a third of your volume to maintain your muscle mass. But that's with similar exercises, with dumbbell and barbell movements. So I think if you're going from your normal routine to bands and body weight, I would actually say that you might need half of your volume or 2/3 of the volume you're doing to maintain. So say on average, you usually throughout a mesocycle, you do about 14 sets on average while you're gaining and going through phases like that. Well, to maintain with banded and body weight stuff, I would probably err on the side of maybe doing about 10 sets per muscle per week at least, just to make sure. And could you get away with less? Yeah. But for most people right now, time isn't the issue. It's just doing enough with their body weight and band stuff. Usually, like right now, people have the time. So I think that might as well play on the safe side of maintaining and err on doing a little bit more volume than you have to maintain than less, is what I would say. So instead of the rule of 1/3 of your volume to maintain, I would say maybe do half or 2/3 of the volume that you're doing, somewhere in that range. All right. So I hope that helps out there. Next question. How do you know what information to trust? So this was a Instagram DM, and it was actually in regards to, all these different news outlets are say this. These guys are saying this. Oh my God. My mustache is looking really gross right now. I'm sorry. Look at me. I'm falling apart here. My hair's a mess. It looks like I just woke up because I did. That makes it look worse. I have a mustache. I'm okay here. I hope you guys don't mind and still find this helpful. So, how do you know what information to trust? So, I lean towards trusting my perception of the character of the person rather than and how they think about things, their general demeanor and stuff like that. And then I'm more likely to trust the information they say. So I don't know if that's the best way to go about things. I'm not perfect in this regard, but if someone is speaking and they're clearly showing critical thinking skills and they are at least attempting to be evidence-based about things, and which I'll touch on that in 1 second as well. The whole science conundrum. I'll get to it. But if they talk about that and, they're open about not knowing stuff and they're not talking in absolutes and they don't have an incentive to sell me something and they have some kind of skin in the game. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of, for instance, in finances and stuff like that, there's a lot of people on the TV shows and stuff like that will say, oh, you should invest in this or invest in this and invest in this, when they don't tell you what they personally are investing in. So they don't necessarily have that kind of skin in the game. And if I'm going to take advice from someone, I would want them to participate in the downside if something went wrong or something like that. So I'm not sure if that made any sense, but I tend to look at, okay, are they open to different ideas? Are they speaking in absolutes, or are they kind of critical thinking? Are they incentivized by things? And if they are giving advice, do they kind of practice what they preach? Maybe that's a better kind of form of saying that, and that sort of thing. All right. So that's kind of what I look for. Now, science. So there is some challenges, and recently, well, I actually think it was a few years ago, but I didn't hear about it till recently. There was a replication crisis in the psychology field, I believe. And basically there was a study done that tried to replicate 100 different studies in psychology or something along those lines. And they found that only 40% of them, somewhere in there, it could have been just under 40%, were actually replicated. Everything else was found to be non-statistically significant. And potential reasons for this is because there's some problems with our p-values that we use. And basically a p-value is the probability that the results that you got are just by chance, or the probability that your results are kind of a false positive. And generally people use the generic p-value is like 0.05. So this would be out of 5 of every 100 papers, or 5%, are likely a false positive. Or there's a 5% chance of that. So one might assume that 5% of the papers that are published and positive are kind of dog shit. And one might also say the flip side is true, to where there's probably a good amount of papers that are rejected, but their results are still technically or potentially valid, but there's that 5 out of 100 chance that they're by chance. And there's also problems with researchers are incentivized to publish significant results. So papers that have a p-value under 0.05. And sometimes that includes just adding more and more to your sample size until you get significant results. Because if you add a few more people and you run the tests again, there's a chance that, or a good likelihood that your p-value is at least going to be different. And there's a chance that it could sneak into that significant range. And also, some journals aren't going to publish papers that are non-significant because we're incentivized to publish significant results. And we're also incentivized to publish kind of new results. Like, no one gets a lot of credit for just doing a replication study. And we're seeing that when studies are being replicated, we're not seeing we're not like seeing a very high replication. And I think that with the sample size in exercise science that's fairly low, we might run into something similar. Now, does that mean that I think that only 30 to 40% of studies are valid? No, I absolutely don't think so. Do I think that there's probably a lot of studies that are probably dog shit? Probably. Now, the question is, what do we do with this? Well, don't kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater here, which is just a weird saying, right? To me, this is a sign of, hey, if science, or taking the scientific method, if humans still get it wrong by doing that quite often, just imagine how wrong people are with trusting their own kind of anecdotes and stuff like that. And I still think that science, while not perfect, is still the best thing that we have right now for kind of getting to the truth of things. All right. So this isn't to say that you shouldn't trust studies and stuff like that, but I definitely think that thinking critically about, hey, what's the broad level of evidence on this? Are there multiple studies? Are there any of these studies been replicated? And what's the effect size? So a p-value doesn't tell you anything about how much of an effect something has. So, for example, let's take creatine, okay? Often we'll see statistically significant results that creatine potentially helps performance and stuff like that. But just because it's statistically significant doesn't tell you anything about the effect that it has, or the magnitude of effect, which with creatine, like if we compared it to steroids, it would have a much smaller effect size. So we're kind of looking for, okay, what's the probability that these results were just by chance, or the p-value? And then we're also looking at, okay, now that these results, they're not by chance, what effect, or what was the effect size of our actual like independent variable that we tested here? All right. So I'm not saying that I am a professional scientist, because I'm not, or that I'm some statistical genius, because I'm definitely not. I think stats is very hard, but those are some problems, and I hope that helps kind of clear things up there and that sort of thing. All right. And the final question here, I'll be quick. Do you think a home gym is worth it? So a lot of people are like, hey, should I buy dumbbells, stuff like that? And you probably can't even get dumbbells anymore. And I don't think that you should pay like 4 times the regular price right now for them. But if you do work out the potential savings that you have regarding your time and a gym membership, I definitely think that it could be worth it. Like if you spend $2,000 to $3,000 on a home gym, which I think that you probably could. Like I haven't looked into it a whole lot, but that's the general feeling I have, is you could get something solid for that and be totally fine. Well, if you saved 30 to 40 minutes a day just in commute time, that's like 3 to 4 hours a week, which, let's say you value your time at like $20 an hour, which I think is low, then that's almost what, $80 a week. So 8, 16, 24, 32, $320 a month. And then let's add 30 or $40 to a gym membership. So let's call it $350. Well, after 6 months, that will be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. We've got those 50s in there. So that's around $2,000 in 6 months. Well, that's almost paying for it there. Now, there's a lot of practical concerns, though, on, do you have space for one? Are you going to be moving and stuff like that? How mobile are you going to have to be? That would be to move a bunch of gym equipment. That might be a son of a bitch every time. Are you in an apartment and you literally can't have one? Like, there's a lot of other considerations, but I do think that for me personally, once your homeboy here settles down and that sort of thing, my dream is to have a 2-story garage, to where in the top story, I have my home gym with a nice view of whatever I might have a view of. But that would be cool. But that's all I got. Thanks for watching, friends, and I will see you next Sunday.